Over 4,000 years ago, around 2334 BCE, in the scorching heat of Mesopotamian summers, the world's first recorded empire was about to be born from the ambitions of one man whose name would echo through eternity. The fertile plains between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers stretched endlessly under bronze-colored skies, dotted with towering ziggurats that pierced the heavens like fingers reaching toward the gods. This was a land where civilization itself had taken its first breath, where writing was invented, where the wheel first turned, and where humanity learned to bend rivers to its will. But in the year 2334 BCE, this cradle of civilization was fractured, bleeding from endless wars between proud city-states that had forgotten how to share the bounty of their rivers. Each settlement stood like an island fortress, surrounded by walls of sun-baked brick, ruled by kings who claimed divine mandate but could barely control the territory beyond their gates. Ur, Uruk, Lagash, Umma, these names carried weight that could crush mountains, yet their rulers spent their days plotting against neighbors who spoke the same language and worshipped the same gods. The Sumerian wars had raged for generations, turning the land between rivers into a chessboard where human lives were pawns sacrificed for strips of irrigated farmland and trading routes. Lugalzagesi of Umma had emerged as the strongest player in this deadly game, conquering city after city until his dominion, according to his own inscriptions, claimed to stretch from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea, a boast modern scholars view as royal hyperbole. He called himself king of the land, and for a brief moment it seemed the fractured world might finally know peace under Sumerian rule. But empires built on conquest alone are like houses built on sand, impressive from a distance, yet vulnerable to the slightest shift in the wind. And that wind was about to blow from the north, carrying with it a man whose origins were so humble that later chroniclers would weave myths around his birth, claiming he was found floating in a reed basket on the river like some Mesopotamian Moses. His name was Sargon, though that was likely not the name his mother whispered to him in his cradle. In the Akkadian tongue, Sargon meant legitimate king, a title he would have to earn through blood and brilliance in a world that offered neither mercy nor second chances to those born without noble blood coursing through their veins. The kingdom of Kish lay in the shadow of greater powers, a minor player in the grand theater of Mesopotamian politics. Its fields yielded decent harvests, its merchants traded modest goods, and its armies numbered in the hundreds rather than thousands. To most observers, Kish was destined to remain forever in the shadow of its southern neighbors, collecting tribute and bending the knee to whoever held power in Sumer. But destiny has a way of choosing the most unlikely vessels for its grand designs. Sargon began his rise not as a prince or general, but as a cupbearer to King Ur-Zababa of Kish, a position that placed him close to power yet far from its source. Day after day, he would serve wine to nobles and generals, listening to their conversations about military tactics, trade negotiations, and the delicate art of statecraft. His eyes absorbed every detail while his mind calculated possibilities that others could not see. The ancient king lists speak of dreams that tormented King Ur-Zababa, visions of a man who would overthrow him and seize his throne. Whether these dreams were real or simply convenient mythology created by later scribes, the king grew increasingly paranoid about his ambitious cupbearer. He ordered Sargon's death, but like all great leaders of history, Sargon possessed that mysterious quality that turns potential disasters into stepping stones toward greatness. Instead of dying in obscurity, Sargon fled Kish and gathered around him a band of followers who shared his vision of something greater than the petty squabbles that had consumed their world for centuries. These were not the noble warriors of epic poems, but craftsmen and farmers, merchants and shepherds, common people who had grown tired of watching their cities burn while kings played their games of pride and conquest. What happened next would reshape the ancient world in ways that its architects could never have imagined. Rather than content himself with carving out a small kingdom from the chaos, Sargon set his sights on the greatest prize of all, Lugalzagesi himself, the self-proclaimed king of the land, whose armies had never known defeat and whose name struck fear into the hearts of rulers from the Zagros Mountains to the shores of the Great Sea. The clash between these two titans was inevitable, a collision of old world and new that would determine whether Mesopotamia would remain forever divided or finally unite under a single banner. Lugalzagesi commanded the finest warriors of Sumer, men trained from childhood in the arts of war, equipped with the best bronze weapons and onager-drawn war carts that rumbled across battlefields. His forces outnumbered Sargon's followers by margins that should have made the outcome a foregone conclusion, but Sargon had something that Lugalzagesi lacked: the hunger of an outsider who understood that conventional tactics would only lead to conventional defeat. Where Sumerian armies relied on heavy infantry formations and massed war cart charges, Sargon's forces moved with the fluidity of water, striking where enemies were weakest and vanishing before retaliation could arrive. His archers, wielding composite bows, could strike from distances that outmatched enemy spears and carts, while his infantry relied on superior organization and mobility rather than superior metallurgy. The battle that decided the fate of Mesopotamia took place on a plain that had witnessed countless conflicts, where the bones of previous wars lay buried beneath soil that would soon drink new blood. Ancient chroniclers describe the clash as a moment of transformation for the land between the rivers. When the dust settled and the screams of the dying faded into silence, Lugalzagesi lay captured, his mighty army scattered like leaves before an autumn storm. The man who had called himself king of the land was paraded through the streets of conquered cities in a wooden yoke, a living symbol that the old order had died and something entirely new was rising from its ashes. But Sargon's triumph was more than military, it was conceptual. For the first time in human history, someone had imagined an empire that transcended tribal and ethnic boundaries, a political entity that could unite different peoples under a single administration while respecting their local customs and beliefs. This was not mere conquest, but transformation, the birth of an idea that would define human civilization for millennia to come. The newly crowned king wasted no time in consolidating his revolutionary victory. Where previous conquerors had been content to exact tribute and demand submission, Sargon began the systematic construction of governmental machinery that could actually administer vast territories with different languages, customs, and economic systems. He systematized one of the earliest known professional standing armies, soldiers whose loyalty belonged to the crown rather than to local nobles or tribal affiliations. This military innovation alone was worth its weight in gold and silver. Previous armies had been seasonal affairs, farmers and craftsmen who took up arms during planting or harvest breaks, men whose primary concerns lay with their fields and workshops rather than distant campaigns. Sargon's standing army could march at any season, strike without warning, and maintain garrisons in conquered territories year-round. Enemy rulers who had previously counted on winter weather or agricultural cycles to protect them now faced the constant threat of Akkadian intervention. From his new capital at Akkad, a city whose exact location remains one of archaeology's great mysteries, Sargon launched campaigns that would extend his empire's boundaries far beyond anything the ancient world had previously imagined. His armies marched eastward into the mountain kingdoms of Elam, where hardy warriors had resisted Sumerian expansion for centuries. These were not the soft targets of the river plains, but fierce mountain fighters who knew every canyon and ridge of their homeland. The Elamite campaign tested every innovation that Sargon had brought to the art of war. Mountain warfare demanded different tactics than plain battles, requiring soldiers who could fight effectively in narrow passes where numerical superiority meant nothing. Sargon's forces adapted with the flexibility that had become their hallmark, using mountain guerrilla techniques against enemies who had invented them, turning Elamite strengths into weaknesses through superior organization and coordination. When Elam fell, its defeat sent shockwaves throughout the ancient Middle East. If the mountain kingdoms could not resist Akkadian expansion, what hope did other regions have? The psychological impact of victory often proved more valuable than the military conquest itself, as potential enemies began calculating whether resistance was worth the inevitable destruction that would follow. Mari fell next, that great trading city on the Middle Euphrates whose merchants had grown wealthy facilitating commerce between Mesopotamia and the Western lands. Mari's surrender was as much economic as military. Its rulers recognized that opposing Akkadian expansion would mean losing access to the trade networks that sustained their prosperity. Better to join the growing empire as a privileged partner than to resist and face the fate of those who had chosen defiance. The conquest of Ebla remains debated. Some sources attribute its destruction to Sargon, others to his grandson Naram-Sin, and still others to rival Mari. Whatever the case, its fall marked Akkadian power reaching a striking distance of the Mediterranean Sea itself. Ebla was not merely another city-state, but a sophisticated commercial empire whose influence reached deep into Anatolia and the Levant. Its archives, discovered by modern archaeologists, reveal a complex bureaucratic system that managed trade relationships across vast distances, a level of administrative sophistication that matched or exceeded anything in Mesopotamia. Yet even Ebla's wealth and organization could not withstand the revolutionary force that Sargon had unleashed upon the world. The city's fall demonstrated that the new Akkadian Empire was not simply another regional power, but a transformative force that could project military strength across distances that had previously made conquest impossible. With each victory, Sargon's empire grew not just in territory but in complexity. Governing diverse populations across such vast distances required administrative innovations that went far beyond traditional tribal or city-state management systems. The king developed a bureaucracy that combined central control with local flexibility, allowing conquered peoples to maintain their cultural identities while integrating them into imperial economic and military structures. The spread of the Akkadian language became both a tool and symbol of this integration. Unlike previous conquerors who had simply imposed tribute obligations, Sargon promoted Akkadian as a common administrative language, helping to facilitate communication across linguistic boundaries without erasing local languages. Over the following centuries, Akkadian would become the diplomatic lingua franca of the Near East, most famously during the Amarna period, while Sumerian remained central to scholarship and religion. This linguistic revolution had profound cultural implications that extended far beyond mere administrative convenience. Akkadian became the language of scholarship and literature for centuries, preserving and transmitting knowledge across ethnic and geographical boundaries. Later civilizations would adopt Akkadian as their diplomatic language, much as Latin would dominate medieval Europe or English dominates modern international relations. The economic integration of Sargon's empire created prosperity on a scale that the ancient world had never experienced. Trade routes that had previously been dangerous frontiers between hostile territories became secure highways protected by Akkadian garrisons. Merchants could travel from Susa to Aleppo, carrying goods worth small fortunes, confident that imperial authority would protect their investments from bandits and local conflicts. Agricultural innovations followed military conquest as Akkadian engineers shared irrigation techniques across the empire's diverse climatic zones. Desert regions learned water management from river valley specialists, while mountain areas contributed terracing methods that increased productivity in previously marginal lands. This technological exchange multiplied the empire's agricultural output, supporting larger urban populations and freeing more workers for specialized crafts and military service. The cultural flowering that followed Akkadian expansion touched every aspect of human civilization. Artists working in different regions began incorporating motifs and techniques from across the empire, creating artistic styles that reflected the cosmopolitan character of Sargon's domain. Sculptors in Syria learned Mesopotamian techniques, while Mesopotamian craftsmen adopted Elamite decorative patterns, producing works that transcended traditional regional boundaries. Religious practices underwent similar transformation as local deities were incorporated into imperial pantheons, while Akkadian gods spread throughout conquered territories. This religious syncretism avoided the conflicts that often arose when conquerors attempted to impose their beliefs on subject populations, instead creating inclusive spiritual systems that reflected the empire's multicultural character. Yet even as Sargon's empire reached the height of its power and influence, the seeds of future challenges were already taking root. Governing such vast territories with ancient communication technologies placed enormous strains on imperial administration. Messages that took weeks to travel from the capital to distant provinces made centralized control increasingly difficult as the empire expanded beyond optimal size for its technological capabilities. Regional governors necessarily operated with considerable autonomy, creating opportunities for ambitious officials to build personal power power bases that might eventually challenge central authority. Sargon's successors would struggle with this fundamental tension between the centripetal forces that held the empire together and the centrifugal pressures that pulled it toward fragmentation. Environmental factors added another layer of complexity to imperial administration. Climate variations that affected agricultural productivity in different regions could not be quickly addressed by central authorities, leading to local famines or surpluses that strained imperial resources and created social tensions. The empire's success had created population growth that made these environmental pressures more dangerous than they had been in earlier periods. Military challenges also evolved as the empire's success inspired innovations among its enemies. Neighboring peoples studied Akkadian tactics and developed countermeasures, while conquered populations preserved knowledge of imperial military methods that could be turned against their former masters during revolts. The very success of Sargon's military innovations gradually eroded their effectiveness as enemies learned to neutralize Akkadian advantages. During Sargon's own reign, these challenges remained manageable through the founder's exceptional leadership abilities and the momentum of continuous expansion that brought new resources to offset growing administrative costs. But future rulers would lack Sargon's charisma and strategic brilliance while inheriting increasingly complex governmental responsibilities. The reign of Naram-Sin, Sargon's grandson, illustrated both the potential and the perils of imperial expansion. Naram-Sin extended Akkadian control even further than his grandfather, leading successful campaigns into regions that had never before experienced Mesopotamian rule. His military achievements were so spectacular that he declared himself a god, commissioning sculptures that depicted him wearing the horned crown of divinity. Yet Naram-Sin's reign also witnessed the first serious challenges to Akkadian imperial authority. Revolts erupted across the empire as local populations, encouraged by the king's extended absences on distant campaigns, attempted to throw off imperial control. These rebellions required increasingly brutal suppression that alienated subject peoples and strained imperial resources. Climate change during the 4.2 kilo-year aridification event added to these political pressures as shifting weather patterns reduced agricultural productivity across much of Mesopotamia. Archaeological evidence suggests that a period of severe drought undermined the irrigation systems that had supported the empire's urban populations, creating food shortages that sparked social unrest and undermined tax collection. The combination of internal revolts, environmental stress, and the enormous costs of maintaining control over such vast territories eventually proved too much for the imperial system to sustain. Within a few generations of Sargon's death, the Akkadian Empire began fragmenting into smaller kingdoms as central authority collapsed and regional governors declared independence. The Gutians, mountain peoples who had previously been contained by Akkadian military superiority, swept down from the Zagros Mountains to occupy much of Mesopotamia. These invasions were not merely military conquests, but demographic movements that brought new populations into regions that had been depopulated by war and environmental degradation. Yet, even as the Akkadian Empire collapsed, its innovations and ideas continued to shape human civilization in ways that its creators could never have imagined. The concept of universal empire that transcended ethnic and linguistic boundaries became a recurring theme in human history, inspiring the Persian Empire, the Roman Empire, and countless other attempts to unite diverse populations under single governmental systems. The administrative techniques developed by Sargon and his successors provided blueprints for later empire builders who faced similar challenges of governing vast territories with diverse populations. The use of local officials, supervised by central administrators, the development of standardized legal codes that respected local customs, and the promotion of common languages for official business all became standard features of imperial governance. The military innovations pioneered by the Akkadians, professional standing armies, combined arms tactics, and systematic logistics, revolutionized warfare and remained influential long after the empire itself had vanished. Alexander the Great's conquests, Roman military expansion, and medieval Islamic campaigns all employed strategic and tactical principles that could be traced back to Akkadian precedents. Perhaps most importantly, Sargon's empire demonstrated that human civilization could transcend the tribal and city-state organizations that had previously limited political development. The idea that different peoples could be united under common governance while maintaining their cultural identities became one of the most powerful concepts in human history, inspiring both liberation and oppression as different leaders interpreted imperial ideals according to their own ambitions and circumstances. The cultural legacy of Akkadian expansion proved even more enduring than its political achievements. The spread of cuneiform writing and the Akkadian language created communication networks that survived the empire's political collapse, enabling the preservation and transmission of knowledge across centuries of political fragmentation. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the Code of Hammurabi, and countless other works of ancient literature owe their survival to the linguistic and cultural foundations established during the Akkadian period. Modern archaeology continues to reveal the extent of Akkadian influence across the ancient Middle East. Excavations from Turkey to Iran uncover artifacts bearing Akkadian inscriptions, evidence of trade relationships that connected distant regions, and architectural innovations that reflect the cosmopolitan character of Sargon's empire. Each new discovery adds detail to our understanding of humanity's first experiment in universal governance. The story of Sargon and his empire remains relevant to contemporary discussions about globalization, cultural diversity, and political integration. The challenges faced by Akkadian administrators, balancing central control with local autonomy, managing economic integration across diverse regions, and maintaining military security while promoting cultural exchange, continue to confront modern leaders attempting to build international institutions and cooperative arrangements. As we stand in our own age of global communication and international commerce, we can recognize in Sargon's achievements the first glimpse of the interconnected world that we inhabit today. His vision of an empire that united rather than merely conquered, that promoted exchange rather than exploitation, and that created prosperity through cooperation rather than domination established principles that continue to inspire those who work toward a more integrated and peaceful world. The bronze-colored plains of Mesopotamia still stretch endlessly under Middle Eastern skies, but the cities that Sargon conquered have long since returned to dust. Yet his true monument is not built of stone or metal, but of ideas. The revolutionary concept that human beings, regardless of their origins or beliefs, can work together to create civilizations that transcend the limitations of tribe and territory. In that sense, Sargon's empire never truly fell, but continues to expand with each generation that chooses cooperation over conflict, integration over isolation, and shared prosperity over zero-sum competition. If this journey through the origins of warfare intrigued you, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and follow us for more deep dives into the moments that shaped human history. Until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and keep exploring the past to understand the present.